too close to the property line, or?
I just wondered, something that came to mind when I saw that.
But yeah, accessory buildings, garages, sheds, saunas, are typically, permitted along with the primary use of the property. So just, we have this certainly in Carp Township. This creates confusion on the lake side. Where's the front of the property? So if you live on the lake, you know where the front is. It faces the lake. The backside faces the road. So we need to deal with that. That's something kind of unique. And then you get lots on corners and especially on a curve and so forth. It's important to have that defined in your zoning ordinance. So this shows the setback areas on those lots. Again, all defined. There are other kinds of zoning things that are called overlay districts. We're not going to have that. Form-based code, we're not going to have that in Carp Lake. So there's two kinds of amendments in zoning. When you change zoning, you can change the text. And if there's new uses come up, or you find there's a problem with something in the zoning ordinance, you clarify that, change it. There's a whole process for doing that. And the same with map amendments. Changing the zoning map. Conditional zoning is something that isn't used very much in Michigan, but the Enabling Act doesn't allow it, and your new zoning ordinance will allow that, where the applicant can voluntarily make an offer, or in terms of like, I'm only going to use this property for such and such, to get their zoning changed. So we also have other kinds of zoning approvals. I mentioned earlier special land uses that may be compatible but require additional review. The new ordinance will provide for site plan review for commercial or industrial or multi-family type projects. And then something called plan unit development, which provides some flexibility in the zoning for larger scale projects. So this is all defined in this draft ordinance, including standards for decisions. These are really important because it's important to have standards so that everybody is treated the same when they come for an approval. So, and if the review standards are met and ordinance requirements met, the approval must be granted. So special land use, again, use that's otherwise compatible in the district, but only perhaps in some locations and requiring additional review and approval. So here we have some examples in a commercial district where the special land uses might be drive-through uses, vehicle sales and service, vehicle fueling stations. Reason those may be designated special land uses is that they can be problematic for neighbors, especially like drive-throughs or where the headlight's going to shine when people are lining up to get their coffee in the morning or whatever else they're serving in a drive-through. So we've got in this draft ordinance pretty specific standards. So this general discretionary standard that's given as an example here, that can be problematic if you ever get taken to court, because what does it mean to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance? As opposed to, what's
That
that?
can be a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. So what's appropriate to me may be inappropriate to you, right? So it's better to have very specific, non-discretionary standards. And then we get into site plan review. And so this new ordinance will provide for site plan review for commercial and industrial projects, just to make sure that the way the project's laid out and so forth minimizes impacts on surrounding properties and traffic and so forth. And stormwater can be a real contentious problem. Planned unit development, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today, but the provisions are in there for, in your ordinance to allow this type of development. Let's hope we get to that point someday where people actually want to develop some housing in Carp Township. So the example shows two different types of layouts. The top one here has kind of the traditional lots. Here you got a cul-de-sac here. Shows the lots probably designed to meet minimum lot size requirements. On a planned unit development, the ordinance would allow that the homes could be concentrated in a smaller area, leaving more open space. And again, that's for like a residential type development. Then we have non-conforming buildings, uses, or lots. So something that exists that previously met the zoning is allowed to continue. So we have non-conforming uses, we have non-conforming structures, and then non-conforming lots. So in Michigan, we have three kinds of methods of dividing land through land divisions, subdivisions, and site condominiums. And I don't know, does Carp Township have a land division ordinance? They changed the state law regarding land divisions about 20 years ago. A lot of communities that adopt land division ordinances.
Any land divisions go through the assessor and county.
I was gonna, may I ask a question?
Okay.
I was just curious, if like our neighboring states in like Minnesota, where in order to have a new subdivision, you can have so many homes that are maybe over 300,000, but then you have to have affordable housing. So much of the property has to be considered affordable housing for lower income. Is that something Michigan is has in place here?
No.
Is that something we have to consider? Okay, I was just curious.
But if they're getting funding from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority to, in fact, create more housing opportunities for low and moderate income persons, a development could have, like if it's an apartment building, that could have rent restricted based on income-based rent.
Or through HUD or through a CDFI or something like that. Okay.
Actually, there's bills in the Michigan legislature now that would take away local government's ability to regulate housing development.
I saw that an MTA was actually talking about that and encouraging.
I'm sorry?
Oh, the Michigan Township Association was,
They're opposed, yeah.
right,
As is the cities and the counties as well. Yeah, they're continually nipping away at local control on certain zoning issues. So the first was extraction, gravel and sand pits, where they limit your ability to regulate that. And that's somewhat understandable because minerals are like gravel is it's not distributed evenly in a community. It tends to be in some very specific areas. And it does have, we do have a need for that. They're trying to do the same thing with short-term rentals and now housing development. Because there is a bit of a housing crisis. Is there more of that water by any chance?
yes,
here?
there's
Yeah,
a
look at the
refrigerator
fridge.
here. Here in this refrigerator.
Does anybody else want water?
Thank you. So there's a lot of things to consider when somebody wants to divide land. And your new ordinance has provisions to regulate that. So in Michigan, typical subdivisions where each lot is surveyed are very expensive to do. If they want to create more housing, they can streamline that. Yeah, so typical subdivision. And then there's something called site condominiums, and these are becoming more popular as a way to get around the Platting Act in Michigan, where people do own their building site, but there's what they call limited commons area and then general commons. So people think of condominiums as like an apartment building, right? But you can have it, looks just like a regular subdivision. Yeah, so here's an example, which is the typical subdivision and which is a site condominium. You can't tell them apart. Yeah, so a condominium really is a form of ownership, not a housing type. So is the zoning administrator here today? There. Hi.
How you doing?
Good. So of course, it's one thing to have zoning, and it's another thing to enforce it. It's a difficult job. So, and people do complain about something they're doing down the road or the neighbor, and then of course the process for dealing with that. So, do you have currently a zoning board of appeals?
Yeah, there is a 3-member zoning board of appeals.
Okay,
I
I
think-
thought you did,
Yeah,
yeah.
they haven't had any meetings because there hasn't been any need for one so far.
Right, which is a good thing, but the zoning board of appeals in your draft
They
ordinance.
were appointed by the supervisor.
So is there a member of the planning commission?
There's
on
one
there?
member of the planning commission on it,
Okay.
one member from, 1 or 2 members. Of 2 other members.
Okay,
I think it's Don Harris, I think is the planning commission member.
and it's also good just to have 1 or 2 alternates in case there's a conflict of interest.
Okay, oh yeah.
It happens,
That happens.
especially in small towns. Oh, that's my in-laws, or
Yeah.
my boss or
Well,
somebody,
yeah,
you know?
well, the supervisor needs to be informed of that, yeah.
And your new ordinance has all this information in it. So the zoning board of appeals, can do a few things. If the zoning administrator turns somebody down on a building permit, saying it doesn't meet the standards of the ordinance or the requirements, they can make an appeal to the zoning board of appeals on that decision. And let's say
Now,
you're
the
dealing,
current zoning ordinance says that there's like a 30-day window of time after a zoning ordinance, a zoning permit is issued, then anyone who wants to file an appeal has to do that within 30 days.
yes,
Would the new ordinance probably be about the same, or?
yes. Yeah, and that follows the state law.
Okay.
So the other thing that happens is, the zoning administrator gets an application, he goes, oh, I don't know how this fits in our ordinance, so you need some help interpreting the ordinance. That is another job for the zoning board of appeals, is to do interpretations. And the final, primary duty is to grant variances, from, the requirements of the ordinance. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And again, having standards, which your new ordinance has for granting variances especially. So administrative appeals, maybe on site plan reviews, use permits, permit denials, enforcement, special land uses. Administrative appeals, yeah, looking at the process by which something was denied. And then interpretations, both the text and the zoning map. Now, one thing with your, and we looked at that map earlier, and that's going to be the base map for your zoning map, has all the parcels on it. So, we're going to stay within parcel lines so that, it's just not a line drawn in thin air. Where exactly is that line, on a map? Especially looking at a small one. And on the ground, that map might be, easily hundreds of feet off. And then types of variances, there's a dimensional type, and the applicant has to show practical difficulty related to the property. So if I show a little example there, a bit hard to see, but because of the shape of this property, it's very hard to meet this setback requirement on a curve especially. So that's their practical difficulty. Now, some communities have granted use variances over the years, and I'm suggesting you don't get into that.
More problems down the road.
Oh,
once you do that.
absolutely, yeah. It's, I've heard people say, well, if you don't meet they'll just give you a variance.
Yeah.
Do something.
But what if the property was used for an industrial or commercial use, but it's no longer zoned for that in the new zoning ordinance?
And the property's been abandoned? Or,
Yeah.
well, that's when you can consider perhaps a map change.
Oh, okay. Because I know there's properties in, like even the school that's zoned residential, but there's people would like to use that property for things other than residential.
So I don't want to talk about use variances. Again, But dimensional variances, again, unique circumstances applying to the property. It may be a steep slope, it may be soils, it may be water course, stream. You know, how is the property different from others? Is there harm? Is it self-made or self-created, the need for the variance? That's a really good test. And again, it needs to be the minimum necessary. So here's a little example. Somebody wants a variance because they want to add on to their house, and it would encroach on the side yard setback. So what do you think about that? A good question might be, well, why not put it on the other side of the house, right? But there might be something over on this side that prevents it, like a garage, or, you know, there's a hill or a steep slope, or, you know, it could be something else going on in here that prevents it from doing it. Then maybe it's not such a problem. So, and actually, they talk about a apartment for in-law or ailing relative. And we're actually proposing to allow accessory dwellings by right in this new ordinance. It's an easy way to expand housing opportunity in the community if people have sufficient room and so forth, whether it's an apartment or actually a separate dwelling on the property. So we are going to try and do our part to address the housing crunch for people.
I have a question on that. Are you gonna limit the number of Airbnbs then? Short-term rentals, will they be limited like other?
Well, we wouldn't want that accessory unit to be a short-term rental, so that's actually in the ordinance draft. If you're gonna build an accessory dwelling unit. You know,
No, I just meant the overall number of short-term rentals that we have here.
Yeah.
I believe Bergland has a number and Ontonagon perhaps has a cap on the percentage or number, I forget what it's based
Yeah,
on.
they don't have a cap. They decided not to do that. But other townships have.
Mhm.
They should be regulated, and they should be, get a permit from
Absolutely.
the township. And we are gonna discuss what that looks like and what the restrictions would be. For example, in Eagle Harbor Township, in the Keweenaw Peninsula, they cap it at a percentage of their total
Right.
number of housing units. And actually, they just lowered it, cap. And they also have distance requirements. You have to be so far from another short-term rental to prevent people from getting boxed in.
Right.
So they're definitely having an impact in our area. And I understand, you know, housing was pretty cheap here for quite a while. I don't know what the current values are, but, you know,
Not anymore.
people from out of town bought homes and then they're doing short-term rentals. So on the one hand, it provides more units for tourism. It helps tourism grow, but I wouldn't want to live next to one.
And we were also waiting for the state to provide some guidance. And
Yeah, there was some legislation done at the state level too regarding them.
Never passed.
It never passed?
No.
Oh.
Again, trying to restrict local
Mhm.
government's ability to regulate short-term rentals.
Right.
The real estate and the tourism people don't want the township to be able to regulate short-term rentals. So we got a bunch of examples here of variances. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. And we're not going to talk about use variances. But this is kind of funny, is kind of the excuses people give for granting variances. Well, no one came to object. Or if somebody wants a bigger sign than what you allow, well, it's the only one I can get, or the only one they make. The ordinance is too strict. It's already done. Or I didn't know. That's a good one. I didn't know. So here's where your question about the commercial use that went away, and now somebody wants to use it again for commercial, and can be dealt with by the ZBA.
The Board of Appeals.
Yes, zoning board of appeals, I'm sorry. So and this is all spelled out in your draft ordinance, is how you deal with these things. Non-conforming uses, non-conforming buildings, non-conforming lots. So really, it's not the job of the ZBA to help a property owner figure it out. A common one is somebody wants to build a 30 by 40 garage on their property, but they don't have room to meet the setbacks, so they want a variance from the side and the rear and front. So but they could do it if they made it 30 by 30 or 20 by 40 or some other dimension. So that's a self-created problem, right? Make it fit. That's their first job. So the variance was never intended to allow people to avoid compliance. But it is there recognizing that not all properties are the same. Some have constraints, such as a ravine or a water body or odd shape or something. So what you don't want is the ZBA to be making zoning decisions or enforcing the ordinance. So it's always hard when, people want a variance, especially in smaller towns. But you got to think about how many people who do comply and don't need a variance. And then the effectiveness of the ordinance, if people know that all you have to do is ask and you get it. Yes, sir.
In granting a variance, don't you need to consult with the adjoining landowners to grant a variance?
There's a public hearing required, and people within 300 feet are notified.
They have to be notified, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Any more? Okay. So I'll talk just a little bit about making decisions. And the Planning Commission is dealing with two laws: Planning Enabling Act, Public Act 33, and Zoning Enabling Act, Public Act 110. And of course, there's other things. There's federal, state laws, there's case law, attorney general opinions, and so forth, as well as other local ordinances. So the roles and responsibilities are different for the Planning Commission. They're appointed. Township Board is elected. And the Zoning Board of Appeals is appointed. So it's always good when, there's some cross membership, so that there's good communication. preparing good minutes. Having joint meetings is always a good idea. And then even talking to your neighbors.